God does ask for some people, people who might be same-sex attracted, not to act in a sexual way and for sex to be reserved for marriage between a man and a woman. But what we spoke about yesterday was that when God gives a law, it follows from his love. It's not like God just has these laws he's super excited about, and he's like, I got these really exciting laws, but I've got no one to follow them. I guess I better create some people so they can follow my laws. No, it's the other way around. God is a God of love. He creates out of love because he wants to love each one of us. And then, like a good parent, he actually puts rules in place because he wants the best for every single person. And we looked at a passage yesterday where Jesus says that yes, he will call every single, in different ways, but he will call every single one of us to give up significant things to follow him. In fact, we surrender our whole lives to him. We surrender our identity to him. We surrender the way we were born to him. He says we'll be born again. There's a cost. It's not just that Jesus kind of takes us from a good life to, okay, now we get an upgrade. No, we surrender our life to him. But he says, and this is a promise in Mark 10, verses 29 and 30, that for those who are willing to count the cost of following him, and he lists a whole bunch of things that might mean, and most of them have to do with relationships. Most of them have to do with the fact that there may be difficulties in relationships. There may be costs to relationships for the sake of following him. But for those who are willing to count the cost, he says he will give 100 times more, both in the present life and even in the age to come, eternal life. So there is this counting of the cost, and yet there is this promise from Jesus that that's not because he doesn't want something for people, it's because ultimately he wants even more for people. And the question, the most fundamental question then is there a God who's big enough and loving enough and trustworthy enough to make good on that promise? And I think that Jesus is the God who is loving enough and big enough and trustworthy enough to make good on even a promise like that. Because he didn't just make the promise, he actually lived the promise. Remember that Jesus himself lived a life that did not include romance or sex or marriage. And yet he lived the most meaningful, the most fulfilled, the most beautiful life ever lived. So just as in Jesus' life, there was a cost, and yet there was 100-fold more, he invites others into that promise as well. And so even as we then live out love towards people in the LGBTQ community or other people that we disagree with, even if it is the case that they disagree with God's laws in different respects, we are able to communicate to them that doesn't mean God doesn't love you. In fact, God does love you. And in fact, if God has a law that is relevant to you, even the reason for that is because it flows from God's love in the first place. If he's asking you to count a cost of something, he will only do that if he actually wants to give you something even better. Let me tell you about the promise of Jesus, and let me tell you why I think he's trustworthy to fulfill that promise.